What's happening, all you minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for my overview of the Absolute Multiversity from DC Comics. So, let's get started. And welcome back, everybody. So, here we have Absolute Multiversity. By the way, if you're enjoying these type of videos and you haven't subscribed yet, please think about subscribing. Ring that bell for notifications. Whoops, that's the thumbs up. And give us a thumbs up, please. That helps with our YouTube algorithm and our channel keep growing. So, Absolute Multiversity is the latest Absolute edition from DC Comics to come out this year in 2022. So, not gonna lie, it's one that took me by surprise that they were actually doing. It makes sense, it has Grant Morrison's name on it. And it's one that I had to read a few times in trade paperback. Because I try to read them in single issues and I just could not get into it. But then again, it's Grant Morrison and it takes you a while to get into things like Final Crisis. This, by the way, is just a little leaflet that I left on there because I'm a sucker for keeping these inside of my books. The book is encased in plastic, but unlike the other leaflets, this one is really glued tight to the back of this. But you're going to watch me hopefully not tear a hole on this slipcase here. Speaking of the slipcase, so yeah, it's a little leaflet right here. Shows the ISBN, retail price $99.99. Blurbs about the book, and then I don't think it even tells you it doesn't tell you what's collected in here. This slipcase, man, DC has really done a lot of cool slipcases this year for their absolutes. It has this rubber finish to it. Like, I wouldn't drop it on the ground and expect it to bounce back, but it's got a rubber texture to it. I love that. Absolute Multiversity right there, and Grant Morrison, the Absolute Multiversity, DC Comics. Pretty slick. Same design here, nothing up at the top. The bottom is the ISBN, is where they usually keep it. And then, of course, the design of Multiversity, which I had upside down because I was reading it. But it is the different Earths, starting with Earth 0 all the way to 51. So that's a design that you're going to see all over the place inside of this book. So speaking of the book itself, there is no dust jacket on the book. And for those of us that picked up the deluxe edition, we know that the dust jacket on the back of it was a really slick way to put the map of the multiverse in there. This time around, no dust jacket. It's just art on board. Actually, that map is interrupted by the actual spine right there. But this time around, they gave you something extra. I thought about pulling this out and hanging it up on my wall as I was reading this book, rereading it this past week. I'm like, okay, let's find out where all these Earths are. So this is just a guide to the multiversal vibrational realms. Vibrations is how you break into the different Earths. So here we have the sphere, the monitor sphere. So here we have all the different Earths. You have the House of Heroes right there with the Rock of Eternity. So there's going to be different names that are going to be familiar to you. Like, this is the Speed Force Wall. Over here to the right are the different ship classifications. And then right here on the left-hand side is the guide to the outer sphere. Like, what's outside of the different Earths. The underworld, apocalypse, heaven. So prepare yourself for this type of reading and pulling this map out a lot if you want to dive deep into this. Because this is one of the heaviest, but one of the greatest reads. After reading it, you will feel like a sense of accomplishment. You will feel like all the years of you mapping out the different Earths or paying attention to the different multiverses in the DC universe or different events, it'll all pay off because someone was listening, and that someone was Grant Morrison. The things that I thought they were doing in Final Crisis really don't even come near what they did here. So we are going to talk about this, but before we go into this, I do want to stress that if you're new to reading DC Comics, this not be one of your early books, this not be even the 10th book you read from DC, get to know a couple of the DC characters. Read one event, and if I can suggest one event, it would be Crisis on Infinite Earths, just so you can learn about the different multiverses in the DC universe. I would suggest Final Crisis, really, or Infinite Crisis, but Infinite Crisis is a follow-up to Crisis on Infinite Earths. So I would at least read one of those events before getting into this, because this can be a bit of a headache. I've joked about it when I talked about the announcement of this book. Get ready for an absolute headache. But my gosh, when you get to understanding this book and these stories in here, this is one of the greatest payoffs in comics. All right, let's crack this open. I am going to talk a little bit about issue number 1. Like, this was pretty much spoiling issue 1 because that sets up what this is. So just in case, minor spoilers for that. I think you probably know by now. All right, let's crack it open and check out this beautiful book. All right, let's crack this sucker open. There's other classification of ships in case you don't want to pull out the poster. Who's this guy reading out of what book? Always gives me those 0 Hour vibes. So here are the credits. Written by Grant Morrison. Art by all these wonderful folks. And the Absolute Multiversity. Yeah. This is going to come into play soon. So I talked about this book being $99.99, has 632 pages. And it does collect Multiversity 1. This is the Cosmic Neighborhood Watch. Multiversity 2, which has another title I don't want to give away. Multiversity Guidebook number 1. And then Society of Superheroes number 1. The Just number 1. Pax Americana number 1. Thunderworld Adventures number 1. Masterman number 1. And Ultra Comics number 1, which everybody has a favorite. Everybody that has read the series has a favorite. And for me, I think it was Thunderworld Adventures. I'm a big fan of that one. Very close to Ultra Comics. I really liked Ultra Comics and Pax Americana. Those are excellent. So what is this about? So this follows up the events of Final Crisis. If you remember what happened in Final Crisis, it was Grant Morrison's way of saying, wait, there are multiple Earths. They're still out there. And this is our way of getting there again. And after years, they kind of left that idea alone with the promise that there was always going to be some kind of follow-up. This didn't happen until 2014, so we're outside, almost wrapping up the New 52 era, getting ready to go into the Rebirth era. Now, I mentioned things like Crisis on Infinite Earths, and Infinite Crisis, and Final Crisis, 0 Hour, because I feel like they play a big role in the history of things that are happening with the multiverse. The multiverse really got started all the way in the Silver Age with the Flash. The Flash of Two Worlds, where Barry Allen was able to vibrate so fast that he crossed over into another Earth, meeting his hero that he read in comics, Jay Garrick. And that kind of sets off the idea that multiple Earths exist in the DC Universe. So it's that basic understanding that you need to have. I mean, it's not rocket science, but believe me, it can get really confusing, especially when you have Grant Morrison with Grant Morrison tropey things in the book. And there are some kind of crazy psychedelic things in here, but hey, I'm along for the ride. So the synopsis of this is pretty simple. There was an idea of a dark monitor that showed up in Final Crisis, and the idea that the monitors have been around for a while watching the different Earths have always been there since Crisis on Infinite Earths. So we get to meet this character right here, Nix Watan, who is the last of the monitors. And he's hanging out with Mr. Stubbs right here, his sidekick, and he's reading a comic book called Ultra. As a matter of fact, it starts off with him reading a comic book. So immediately, it goes back to that Silver Age, to that Flash of Two Worlds, that this character is reading about another character that will show up here in these pages. So because you're a superhero in one Earth, doesn't mean that you're a superhero on another Earth. Could be that you're just a comic book or a fiction. And he is summoned to Earth 7, where he meets this guy right here. This is the Thunderer. And the Thunderer is kind of like Thor, like an aboriginal version of the Thor. In this world, it's not an anti-monitor that is destroying it, but it is this creature right here known as the Gentry. They are destroying this world, because all that's left, all the superheroes are gone, but the only thing that's left is Thunderer right there. And he's trying to figure out why this creature many creatures. He doesn't know exactly what it is, why it's trying to kill this world. So it makes it a promise that if he lets the Thunderer go, that it can take him instead. And it wants this monitor. So he gets absorbed by the Gentry, and he's promising Mr. Stubbs that somehow they're going to get out of here, because that's what happens. Somehow they're going to make it out of this. And I love the fact, like, right here, we'll beat them at their game. We'll find a way, won't we? And then he's throwing the comic book away going, won't we? So meta, so self-aware. So that's what kind of ride you're in. Then we jump to Earth 23, where we see this character. This is Calvin Ellis, who is the Superman of this particular Earth. And he's beating a giant robot right there. And he's talking to Brainiac. Brainiac's like his AI. And he jumps back, and you find out that he is President of the United States. And his crew on this airplane have no idea that he is also Superman. So it's a very unique take on Superman. So then he goes back to the Hall of Justice, or the Satellite rather, where he meets the rest of the Justice League, and they're trying to figure out what in the hell Lex Luthor has made now, because he was on some kind of drugs, and he made this right here. It's a cube. It's a drug-fueled attempt to build a gateway to alternate worlds. So they are aware of the alternate worlds. And of course, this opens up some kind of cosmic gateway that pulls him in. So Superman from Earth 23 gets sucked into the House of Heroes right here, which you saw in that map. It's the middle of the map. And he's greeted by Captain Carrot. And Captain Carrot comes from a Earth that pretty much is anthropomorphic animals that are versions of the DC Universe. I want to say, like, Black Canary. Was she a aardvark? I mean, it makes sense if she was a canary. But anyway, think of like Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham, things like that. But Captain Carrot has been around for quite a number of years. And here he is greeted by other characters from the multiverse, including characters like Dino Cop, who's kind of a take on Savage Dragon, just because he's a police officer. He's also a dinosaur with a fin. Stegosaurus, of course. So here he is greeted by Thunderer, and Thunderer's telling him that he needs to go back to Earth 7 to save it, because that's where they're going to find the last monitor. So he puts Brainiac, his AI, plugs it up to the ship, and who pops up? Harbinger. That's right, the character from Crisis on Infinite Earths, to tell him all about the 52 worlds and how the threat must be destroyed that is trying to go after these worlds. So they jump on the ship, and I love this idea right here. This is the Ultima Thule, and the Ultima Thule is the ship that can traverse through different multiverses, so through different Earths. So the idea of vibrating really fast, like the Flash, Barry Allen, that I talked about, is still being used to this day. But instead of vibrations, it's like they're hearing music, they're hearing sound. So it's really cool. It's a really unique way of going through there. They see creatures through this multiverse. So they're heading to Earth 7, but they instead go to Earth 8. And the one thing I forgot to mention, now there's so much to just absorb here. So he's greeted by this guy right here. This is Red Racer, who of course is the Flash. He's from Earth 36, who's a huge comic book fan. And in a very Flash fashion, he's like, hey, I read about your adventures. I'm a huge comic book nerd. You signed this for me. And it's crazy for Calvin to hear that he is a comic book on this particular Earth. So this is where Captain Carrot's like, hey, well, you know, it's just really strange that some of us are heroes in our own Earths, and then we're just fictional characters in others. But I love the idea that they're taking Red Racer with them, because he's the comic book nerd. He actually knows how things are going to play out, and he understands the history of comics and different Earths. Again, I think it really does help from reading some DC comics. Don't let this be your journey into DC. But they mention Major Comics, and that's very important, because the next Earth they're going to is the Major Comics Earth, which is very obvious Marvel Comics when you have characters like this. This is Lord Havoc, who's taking the lightning axe of Wunderjin. He has the Genesis Egg and the Omni Gauntlets. I mean, immediately you're thinking Infinity Gauntlet, the Galactus Egg, and of course, Thor's Mjolnir, right? And the guy looks like Doctor Doom, but they're not greeted, they're actually halted by these Avengers right here. These characters that are supposed to be Avengers. So miscommunications. I do like Big Baby, who's kind of like your Hulk, Big Baby Bash Bunny. And because Captain Carrot comes from a cartoon universe, laws of physics don't work the same there, so he's able to pop back into shape. So with a group of people from different Earths that have been summoned to this House of Heroes, they are supposed to stop this force, this gentry. And they're going to try to find Nyx Watan. Again, the last of the monitors. But the twist is that Nyx has been corrupted and has become a dark version of a monitor. And that's where the big cliffhanger ends with issue number 1. Then we jump into a series of one-shots. And these one-shots are so fun. And like you have this one right here. This is the Society of Superheroes. And this is definitely your poppy type of book. Your 1940s retro style of storytelling. This is drawn by Chris Sprouse. I forgot to mention the artist in the first story. This is Ivan Reis, who actually does issue number 2, which I don't want to even go over because that's for you to find out how this ends, because there's really not a lot here. But this one is Chris Sprouse, who, of course, drew Legion of Superheroes, went on to do Legionnaires, and had been working at DC for a long time. So you have characters in here that you're going to recognize immediately. I'm sure some of you recognize the Atom's mask, or Dr. Fate's mask. There's Lady Blackhawk and her Blackhawks here. Abin Zur, the Green Lantern, shows up here. They're all fighting Vandal Savage. It's an alternate reality, of course. Then we jump into Ben Oliver's, and all of this written by Grant Morrison. This is The Just. The Just is an interesting take on the legacy characters. It's pretty much just a world where the children of superheroes and legacy characters are all part of social media. They're huge into social media. So you have characters like Connor Hawke here. You have Kyle Rayner. The Super Sons show up here. And it's an interesting take on fighting supervillains. I love the fact that Morrison uses lesser-known characters like Bloodwind. Bloodwind showed up. I was excited when Bloodwind showed up. I remember, because I haven't seen Bloodwind since, I think, like, the death of Superman when he was part of the Justice League. But he shows up in the House of Heroes. So I remember when that happened, I was like, oh my gosh, is Bloodwind going to play a huge important part in all of this? I sure hope so, because he's right in the center. But he does show up from time to time. Now, speaking from time to time, there is one overall arc in this. There's something that's connecting all these stories via comic books. And in a way, kind of like the way that Morrison wrote the Seven Soldiers. There was an overall arc that was connecting all these little mini-series. In this, they're connecting all the little mini-stories. The next story right here is a take on Watchmen. And it is such an interesting take on Watchmen. I'm sure when I say things like that, some people are rolling their eyes. Enough's enough. We've seen this over and over. But their take on Watchmen is pretty interesting. It is drawn by Frank Quitely, and it's even done with a Dave Gibbons type of panel layout and Watchmen style. Instead of using the characters of the Watchmen, though, they used the Charlton characters, who the characters of Watchmen were based on. So I remember when this one came out, people would not stop talking about Pax Americana. They were like, oh, this is brilliant. This is how you do a proper miniseries. I would love to read an 8-issue miniseries of this world. And honestly, I would too. It would be really cool. And there has been talks of Morrison going back and showing us more Earths, because I'm going to talk about the Guidebook here in a little bit. But it's just really cool to see characters like Captain Atom, who's, of course, Dr. Manhattan in the Watchmen universe, and Blue Beetle show up here instead of Night Owl. But very, very cool take. And then we get, this is what I was talking about, the Thunderworld Adventures. I love this story because this is written by Grant Morrison. Sorry. It's drawn by Cameron Stewart. But the way that Cameron Stewart draws it, it has a very almost timeless type of art. This Fawcett style that you would have seen in comics like Captain Marvel, or I guess now Shazam, whatever the hell DC's calling him these days. He's still Shazam, right? Or is the Wizard still Shazam? I really cannot keep up. Please, somebody in the comments, let me know what they call Billy Batson's alter ego. I think it's Captain Marvel in the comics. They can still do that. But anyway, it is such a good throwback to that era. And let's get to this right here. This is the Guidebook, and it's such a cool way because you see these characters right here from different Earths. You have like the chibi-size superheroes. This is Dick Grayson being Batman, and you have Bruce Wayne, Batman from this particular Earth. But this helps set up the guidebook. And the guidebook is so unique. I love it. You have art here. This is, I had no idea. This is Scott McDaniel, but it's inks by, I think it's Paulo Cicada. And Marcos Till does the actual Batman section. But the Command D is got layouts by Scott McDaniel. I couldn't even tell. So good to see all of these Jack Kirby characters together. You have the OMAC, Command D, Fourth World characters in here. But this sets up the Multiversity Guidebook. This is so awesome. When I was reading this in single issues, these were some of the last single issues I was reading, because I was just so excited about this event. After rereading Final Crisis so many times, I wanted to see a follow-up to some of those characters that had appeared. So this sets up the different Earths. You have Earth 0, which is, of course, the New 52 Earth. Earth 1, which is your Earth 1 stories, like the Earth 1. But that's what they're called. Like the Gary Frank Batman stories, or the Grant Morrison Wonder Woman stories. That's where they take place. They also did Teen Titans. There's a box set of those. Then you have Earth 2. You have Earth 3, which is where the Crime Syndicate is from. Earth 4, which we saw here, which is the Pax Americana. This is the Fawcett world, or maybe the Marvels world. Earth 6, 7, and you're going to be... you're definitely going to see characters you've seen through DC Comics here. Whether you've been reading them for 60 years, or you've just been reading them for a few years, you're going to notice characters here from DC Comics. But I love the fact that they keep it open for different Earths. Like, it's unknown worlds. And that's what I was excited for. I was excited for 52 different one-shots with different Earths. And it's Grant Morrison pretty much laying the map and foundation for it. This is it, DC. This is your multiverses. These are the only worlds you can cross over into. And then, of course, somebody coming in 10 years later going, but wait, there's 52 more Earths. Who didn't want that? Darwin Cook gets... Hell yes, Darwin Cook gets his own Earth right there. Yes, he does. All right, let's skip through here because I don't want to go through all of these. This is the Masterman story arc. This is drawn by Jim Lee and Scott Williams. And it's pretty much, what if Superman landed in Germany and became a Nazi? It's a rough story to read, with some hope. And then we get Ultra Comics, which is the most important comic book out of these, besides Multiversity 1 and 2. This is drawn by Doug Mahnke, and it tells the story of this particular character who is the only superhero in this world. And it really reminds me of what they did with Superboy Prime. That's what we all called him. Superboy in the Crisis on Infinite Earths. There were no superheroes. He used to read about characters, and he became the first superhero. And that's kind of what this is. But it goes a different way that I don't want to spoil. This is Earth 33, I believe. And I say it's really important because that's what comic book that Nick Swanton's reading at the very beginning, and the comic book keeps showing up over and over again. And it has a really creepy warning. I'm censoring the final page of the Masterman, so I don't spoil that for anybody. The warning is, only you can save the world. If you value your lives, you must, somebody wrote, not read this comic. This comic is cursed. Grant Morrison has this level of understanding the universe that I don't. And I can see where people think that's pretentious. I can see where people are like, Grant Morrison, no thank you. I like my stories linear and simple and easy to follow. And not to say that other writers don't write complex stories either. But I really do believe that they have an understanding of how magic works. I've seen interviews with Grant Morrison where they talk about, oh yeah, magic is real. It's all through comics. I think that somewhere in here, there is a message. And the message is that if you write it, then it can be real. The message is that you, us, me, the people watching this video, you all are part of this story. And the more you read this, and the more you read Morrison stuff, all the way back to Animal Man, you're going to be like, holy crap, I think I just joined a cult. You put it all together. Of course, mileage may vary, but I think it's a phenomenal story. It gave me a headache when I was reading it in single issues. It wasn't until I was reading it in the trade paperback. No, actually, when I got the deluxe, I was like, okay, I get it now. This is really cool. I appreciate it a lot more. Of course, some time had passed since then. I had read Final Crisis a few times, and I started to really enjoy it more for what it was. And what really helped was reading The Fourth World by Jack Kirby. I don't know why. But yes, there is one more issue. I'm not even going to show any pages of that, but I am going to show you the director's cut. So they do have the full director's cut of issues 1 in here, and the full director's cut of Pax Americana, which is the Watchmen issue with the Charlton characters. Almost said Charlton Heston. All right, let's take a look at the rest of the back matter here. So we have variant covers, even one by Grant Morrison. I love this take on the Cosmic Odyssey right there. This is after Mike Mignola. Let's see here. Mike Allred, with Laura Allred after Mike Mignola. Love it. Francis Manipool. Grant Morrison doing designs. Hell yes. So there's some homage covers here, obviously. And believe me, the covers do not spoil anything. So this is really for people that love the DC Universe, that love the science behind the DC Universe, that love the different Earths. And I know that splits people up, because when I worked at a comic book store, there were people that were loving Infinite Crisis and people that were like, no, we're done with these multiple Earths. This is so stupid. There's one Batman and that's it. We don't need 3 Batman running around. I guess to each their own. And here's the Multiversity Guidebook right here. Oh, I forgot to mention that in the guidebook, that's where the map of the multiverse shows up. So you don't have to pull out your poster, but I recommend hanging this up and reading this and going, oh, okay, that's where that fits in. I forgot to mention that that's where it shows up in the guidebook. And you have character designs, sketches, and t-shirts that never came to be. There's an appendix, and then the biographies. Again, you see that everywhere. That is the symbol for the multiverse right there on the spine. All right, let's talk about the binding. 632 pages. It is sewn binding, and I just showed one of the best examples of the way the book lays over. So I think this is a good example of the show how the book lays over, because you are going to get some gutter loss right there. That's something that I noticed. It's minimal, but you can really tell whenever the letters are right in the center. And that's in the middle of the book. Let's look towards front of the book. The paper's printed in this thick, glossy paper. But yeah, get a gutter curve right there. And I don't know if there's anything in the back I can show that has spread page. But I can just show how it lays over. So yes, this is definitely for people that love Elseworld tales. You might see some characters show up from your favorite Elseworld stories. It's for people that love just Superman. It is a Superman story at heart, I feel. I feel like Grant Morrison really loves the character of Superman. And it kind of helps answer a lot of questions about the multiverse. But yet, not really your first rodeo with DC. I don't recommend that. But if you did read this as your first DC Comics, I would love to know that. Especially if you love it and you're still here. Alright, that's it. Everyone, stay healthy and safe. No, what am I doing? That, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this book, don't forget to check out our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this Absolute Edition. Let me know in the comments down below if you are still confused, if you're waiting to read Final Crisis, Crisis on Infinite Earths, if you're actually going to read some DC stuff before jumping into this, or if you're picking it up because you're like, man, I can't help myself, that artwork looks so good. I would love to know all those comments down below, and if you have any questions, I can try to answer them as best as possible. But yes, if you have any questions, leave them down below. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications to let you know when our videos are going live. We are on Spreadshop and Patreon, and our Patreon has different tiers starting at $1. But everyone, stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.